Many agency owners don't begin with the end in mind. Do you? If not, let me be the first to say you're not alone. As we heard from Matt Hines on the show just a few weeks back, it's often, how much do we need to make? Well, more. When will I be able to retire? Not now. If that's you and you answer those sorts of questions in that way, you're not alone, and you're really going to enjoy this conversation with a seasoned agency owner, Karl Heasman, founder of Greycott Consultancy. He's had successful exits in his past and now helps other agency owners prepare for acquisition with the end in mind. He shares where to start looking for potential buyers for your agency with a few surprising additions to the typical hit list, how to determine a potential timeline for an exit, the important financial metrics you should be tracking now if you're headed down that path. And toward the end of the conversation, Karl gets into some very practical advice for managing conversations internally when you've decided to pursue a relationship with what he recommends calling a growth partner rather than simply an investor or a buyer of the agency. I'll let you hear from him why that phrasing in particular matters in just a bit. To kick things off for now, let's hear from Karl as he recaps a conversation he had with a potential investor for his agency after a dinner meeting between them and his business partner seemed to have gone really well.
At the early stage of me deciding to sell my agency. So we were, I think I was 10 years into running my agency. I'd had a number of approaches in the past and ignored them. And this was kind of my first date, I guess, with a potential investor. And I took my junior partner with me, and as thought the meeting went incredibly well. I got some feedback afterwards by one of the potential buyers, and he said to me, I really enjoyed our meeting. I thought the agency, I like the brand, I like your client list, I like the numbers, I like you. He said, but there was something rather strange going on with you or a dynamic between you and your business partner. And he said, I don't want to be your marriage guidance counselors. So basically, I'm not going to proceed at this time. That was, and it was a rather strange sort of feedback, as I thought it got incredibly well. But clearly, my business partner's body language was very negative. He didn't say anything that I could hear that suggested there was a problem. But clearly, I was looking for over the table at the buyers, and I wasn't looking to my side at my junior partner. But clearly, he wasn't interested in selling, and clearly the body language said everything.
Oh man, that must have been just kind of caught you off guard in that conversation, thinking, man, this is really kind of my first interaction, so to speak, as you mentioned, your first date of going to sell a business, going to sell the agency. I want to get into, Karl, some of the things that you have since learned as you've had your own successes and now you're helping other agencies prepare for an exit and some of the steps that they can take to get there. But I first have to ask, what do you think were some of the main learnings out of that story when you go back to it specifically? What was the first thing that kind of you took away from that instance that then impacted the way that you went forward in the next year and the years that followed from there?
I think obviously the most obvious feedback from me was that clearly me and my business partner needs to be on the same page, and that clearly wasn't the case. So I think my first lesson would be make sure all of the shareholders actively in agreement on the direction of the business, and if possible, try to get that agreed at the outset when you first come together as a partnership or as a threesome or however many directors you've got. Try to get an understanding of where you're going at the beginning. Try to have a view of what the end result might be, and also maybe a rough time schedule or time frame of what you're looking to achieve by when. I think when you're starting out as an agency owner, particularly with partners, you're so kind of excited to get started that you don't actually have the end in mind. And I think when that journey that starts, or when one of the partners starts to think about that exit or that journey, that's when things can obviously get derailed, because you've not had that conversation before. Maybe you haven't had a shareholder agreement in place, which would be a problem. Fortunately, I did. And in the UK, we have drag and tag rules on our shares, which means that the majority shareholder basically can drag along the other shareholders into a sale and they can't object. And fortunately, I had that in my agreement. But what we didn't do is discuss, where are we going with this? How far are we both going? I guess sometimes you don't know the answer, but at least you can start to facilitate, some options or some sort of guide where you say, okay, if one of us wants to get off, this is the procedure that we follow.
Yeah, you might not know exactly where you're going by when, but at least you can have that conversation so that you can at least get on the same page of, "Hey, I don't know. Hey, I do know, and this is exactly what I'm picturing." Well, okay, I don't know what I exactly want, but I know it's not that, right? And you want to have those conversations early and often, and I think that's a really great starting point and a key lesson from your story there of being caught off guard with that investor meeting. As we kind of zoom out, Carl, and look at an agency owner listening to this that is either looking to exit sometime soon or further down the road, you've seen this enough times in both your own journey and the agencies that you consult with. I imagine that you've seen some repeatable steps that you need to take on this journey in order to get to the acquisition event that you're aiming for. If again, that's where you're going by a certain time or at least estimated, what are some of those major markers for the agency owner who maybe has begun without the end in mind, as you mentioned earlier? What are some of those key markers they should keep in mind to give them kind of a vision for the road ahead? And then we'll get into some of the tactical things of how they can prep accordingly.
Yeah, some of the I guess some of the key things that is agreeing, with the shareholders, that you actually want to look for a growth partner or an exit, or a merger. So that's the first point. Is that, is there agreement amongst the board that this is where we want? Once you've actually established that, and you kind of agreed roughly what that time frame is, you then start looking at the business and thinking about, what would be a natural strategic partner, what would be who would be a potential buyer. Start to brainstorm, those buyers. What is it a competitor? Is it a complementary agency? Is it sometimes it's actually a client that wants to buy you, or a supplier that wants to buy you. So start thinking about, who might want to buy you. And then, if you've got the opportunity, look at have they actually bought anyone before. So if you've got any history about, the acquisitions they've done before, you get a sense of what sort of agency they're looking to buy and what size agency they might buy. You can start benchmarking yourself against those agencies that were bought then, and it gives you a sense of, okay, that's an attractive agency. Why was it bought? And you can start digging into company house information on their account, on their finances, and start to follow them on social media and see what is it about those agencies that were bought by one of your potential buyers that made them attractive. So that's a really big, sort of broad brush picture. Once you kind of you started that journey, you're thinking, okay, we're going to look for a growth partner, for want of a better word. I think then you start looking at the agency itself and what makes it attractive. And that's when you've got to get into the detail of, okay, the numbers, of course, have got to look good. Typically the last 3 years of accounts ideally would be on a growth projection, so that you can sell a good story. And that, of course, comes with not only percentage growth, anything over 15 or 20% growth starts to put you on kind of on the map as a sort of a slightly higher growing agency. Again, 15 to 20% net profit is a key number to sort of, if you're in those sort of numbers, it starts to make you look a bit more attractive. If you're a high growth agency, and that can be way over 15, 20%, you might be growing at 30, 40%. A buyer might believe that some of that growth potential could come into their business. And that's why they're interested in buying an agency that's a fast growing one. They might think that you've got some special source that allows you to sort of, to know what you're doing and grow quickly. So of course you've got to get your numbers right.
And just on those numbers, Carl, for folks who are listening here, because we've had a lot of agency owners on the show that say, hey, one mistake I've made as an agency owner is not early on investing in my own financial literacy, understanding the finances of the business. So I just wanted to double
Mm,
back and make sure I heard you correctly for
mm.
listeners. Were you saying that 15 to 20% year over year growth is something that makes it very appealing, as well as that 15 to 20% net profit? Or were you just talking those percentages as related to net profit?
Well, they're the key net profit figures. 15 to 20% or above is great. I know the bigger you get, the more difficult it is to get those higher net profit figures. I work with agencies that are on maybe 30% net profit because they're slightly smaller. Bigger agencies tend to get smaller net profit. The growth number 15 to 20% is kind of a is kind of a minimum. You need to really be growing, and actually 15 to 20% growth isn't hugely that big. As 20 plus 20% plus would be probably be better if you're going to look for a very attractive a more attractive sale. Let's suppose that any business can sell, but ideally, you want to be thinking about the most attractive one is to sell at a time when you've gone through a period of growth.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you for doubling back on that. The other thing I know you talk about and advise agency owners on, kind of what I hear you saying so far is you've got to get agreement with your partners, then you start to look at potential buyers, and then you take stock of your current state with some of the existing both growth and profitability numbers. And from there, often is it looking at timing and starting to kind of reverse engineer what your timeline might look like? Or what would you say is kind of the fourth step after you've taken these, you at least started down the road of these first three that you've advised folks on today?
Once you've made the decision to start looking, you at an exit. Firstly, you get agreement amongst the directors that there's an appetite for doing that. Are you all on the same page for that? Timing wise, time timing is probably the single most important factor in valuation. Because if you go into the market when there's lots of buyers, then clearly you're going to get a much greater potential value. If you go to market when there's no one or few buyers, then you're going to get a low. So classic supply and demand kicks in. What is the state of the market at the time? Is the market, is there a lot of um, is it a time where borrowing is cheaper, so therefore buyers can borrow money in order to buy an agency. So what is the state of the market at the moment is a real key thing, and that's something again you can't control. You could control going to market at a particular time when you think, actually, we're in a set recession right now. This isn't a good time. So let's wait until maybe the year of an election because the incumbent party tries to make the economy as sweet as possible to get re-elected. Often you find that going to market the year of an election is the next year in both the US and UK is likely to be a better year to go to market because there's going to be hopefully better than the economy is going to be better than this year. There's quite a few factors that some of them are out of your control, but some of them you can just say, okay, that this is a good time to go. Let's prepare ourselves to go to market at that point. So they're key. They're key, certainly key factors.
That's really good advice. Not something I've heard specifically. What you were saying there of the timing in the market didn't necessarily surprise me, but I think that's a really good tip. Just looking at the bigger factors outside macroeconomic and political factors that could actually play into things that you might think have really nothing to do with your agency, but again, the more financially literate you are and aware of those bigger things, then you're likely going to be able to make some better decisions. So, Carl, next thing I wanted to tee you up on were some of the key numbers that agency owners should be thinking about tracking to prepare for investor questions. So we talked about some of the big ones, your growth percentage, but definitely your net profit. If you're only looking at growth and you're hitting kind of that minimum threshold that you mentioned earlier, they could take a closer look and just say no. And you say, wait, look at all this growth. That's not the whole story. What are some of the other questions that investors are going to ask agency owners in your experience, and some of the numbers they're going to want to see so that anyone listening to this can start to reverse engineer, start to track those metrics and prepare for those questions in advance?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's a great question as well. I think one of the key numbers that they're going to ask and track is how much income do you have from each of your clients? And they're going to be particularly concerned when they get too much income from one client. So if any client is billing way over 20-25% of your income, you've got a massive threat to the stability of the agency. And I'm always surprised to see so many agencies have often one or two really major clients. Sometimes 50% of their business is coming from one client. Unfortunately, that actually, the numbers might be good, the net profit might be good, the growth might be good, but actually, it detracts from its appeal to an investor if one client dominates the income. And I have actually heard of an agency stopping billing or stopping winning new business from existing clients because of that. And I can see why, because some investors actually don't actually include those numbers in their valuation because they know there's a huge threat that client leaves. When a deal's done, then the business is obviously worth considerably less. So that's definitely one of the key factors.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. One of the things I've heard from Drew McClellan at Agency Management Institute, he calls them guerrilla clients, those that are taking up a outsized portion of your ARR, and they kind of lead you around by the nose. There's implications with servicing clients and profitability for those sorts of clients, but as you point out here, there's also risk if you are looking for an exit or planning for an acquisition, that those pose a threat to you and to investors. So you need to be aware of those. What are some of the others, Karl, that folks listening to this might not be thinking about, things that, again, they want to prepare for those investor questions ahead of time, in addition to, we've got, okay, growth, we've got profitability, we've got percentage of income, by client, and making sure that you don't have 20% or more coming from one. What else can we add to this list for people today? It's already a good list going today.
Okay. Well, let's get a few more KPIs out there, shall we? The other one I think is really useful to know, and again, I'm surprised that quite a lot of agencies I work with at the outset don't know. It's what percentage of income do they have by service offering? They really need to know what ideally what their mix of income is by service. That's really key, because you might find that you've got a potential buyer that sort of that sees your numbers, your presentation, your agency creds, and thinks actually you're a competitor to a certain service offering that they already have, and don't actually think that's attractive. But actually, it might be a tiny service offering compared to the overall mix of income from the agency, and it might detract from the appeal. Might actually be more attractive because sometimes competitors like to buy other agencies that have the same service, but often it's at least the agency or the buyer can see where their income is coming from, and think, okay, well, that would complement our service offering really well. Either make our existing offering bigger, or it'll actually complement it. So that's something really useful to know where's the income coming from by service offering. Also useful to know is which of those service offerings is typically the first service offering that a client will buy from an agency. Normally, an agency will have a particular service offering which is easier to buy, or quicker, or cheaper to buy, and it gives the agency a chance to prove itself, to build relationships with the client before the client then buys more often. So again, knowing what your first service offering, your lead service offering is, that then leads to other conversations and other work, is a useful byproduct of knowing the percentage of income by service offering. Another KPI would be to understand the gross margin by client. So certain clients, if you can only measure the size of the client in terms of income, but you don't measure the margin, that gives the buyer a less clear view of what the actual situation is in the business. So often you'll find your biggest client is your smallest margin client, because they push you down on price. And over time, it might actually be that is not your perfect client. You don't really want to continue that relationship over time, because actually it's reducing your margin, and you might find a a big client might get as low as 5 or 10% margin on it, where you've got smaller clients that are 3 or 4 times that. And actually, understanding that mix is really, really important to a healthy agency that is attractive for a buyer.
Exactly. I could not agree with you more, Carl. Here at teamwork.com, we've been investing more into our product, which is highly used by agencies to not only manage their client work, but to look at that profitability. And so that's something that we've been trying to continue to build into the product so that our agency customers can look at that profitability, not only by project, but look at the profitability if you're billing on retainer. And that sort of reporting is just so key. So I love to hear you reiterating the importance of that, because I know that we've also been doubling down on trying to enable our customers who are also agencies to be able to actually facilitate that. So we've got a great list of KPIs, some maybe not heard that often advice of looking at kind of the macroeconomics and political situation when you're looking to buy. I want to, or when you're looking to try and sell. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, Carl. You mentioned once you've decided, hey, I want to go down this track, I'm looking for a growth partner, I'm looking for an exit, targeting an acquisition. You've talked with your partners about it, as
Yeah.
we learned from your candid story there. And then you start to identify potential buyers. You gave us some tips on where to start, of who might those buyers be who have purchased other agencies similar to yours. They might be clients. Any other tips on where to look for those potential buyers? And I think even more importantly, how to start evaluating them. Because just because you've identified them doesn't mean that they're going to be a good fit for what you're looking for. So talk us through a little bit more there, because I think some agency owners could, oh, we got some things in line. We maybe have some potential buyers, but there's still some pitfalls ahead if you're not thinking that far ahead, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, I think buyers can come from anywhere. Obviously, they can come from from friends, from family members, connections. Come from industry, networking events. It can come from anywhere. But I think if when you're embarking on this journey, I think firstly is to consider where you could network to find potential um, buyers. So think about the industry we're in, the networking events you can go to, because often those conversations start from over a drink after a networking event or an industry event. And I've got a client that's going through a sale at the moment, and he and I went to a networking event just in the summer, and we had a few beers afterwards. And now this particular buyer is making the approach. So you never really know where they're coming from, but I would certainly look at your own connections, look at industry news, who's buying. Um, I think look at all your supplier network, your partners. Because often a buyer will come from somewhere else. It'll come from a buyer from a partner company that you're supplying to or working with. Also, kind of look at your clients' other agencies. You may or may not know who they are, so you can find them out by asking your client, what other agencies do you work with? The fact that they are working with your client gives a deferred kind of trust that your client trusts them, client trusts you. Therefore, you've got a good excuse to have a conversation. It might be that they are looking. They know who you are because they know you're billing the same client. It might be that you obviously have complementary services, otherwise you wouldn't be working with the same client. Those conversations often lead to partnerships, which then often lead to partnerships that go on to a more involved conversation, which might be, okay, let's get closer than a partnership.
That is a great list. I just want to encourage anybody, hit that back button a couple of times and just start writing down those potential sources of investors or buyers, as Carl was listing off there. I think, you started with your network, but drilled into some very specific examples that might not have been on people's radar, some of your partners. And I love that last one you touched on, Carl, the other agencies that are working with your client that are just one degree of separation. And as you pointed out there, if they have a complementary service, it could make a lot of sense. And there's already some familiarity potential for a warm intro there. As you've identified some of those, Carl, and you start to approach those folks, what are some common advice that you're giving to your clients as they're starting to evaluate those potential buyers, as they're starting to have those conversations? Could be completely, uncharted waters for agency owners who are thinking about this, going into those conversations for the first time. What are some pieces of advice you give to them as they're wading into those new waters?
Well, I would probably, it's got to start with chemistry. Ideally, you're going to get a chance to meet the founder of the other, the other agency, in this case. And if you've got good chemistry, that's the important thing. So find out, can you get on with these people? Find out if you can, what are their values? They might publish their values, or you'll get a sense of what their values are, and are they values that you share? I think if you've got shared values, you've got some chemistry, you've got complementary services, that's the foundation of a more meaningful conversation. And ideally that could lead to partner conversation, let's collaborate, which then gives up both parties the opportunity to work together on a potential, campaign together. And that then gives both parties the opportunity to sort of scope each other out, see, how they work, see what the quality of their work is. And that then often leads to or can lead to a more detailed conversation. Well, where are you going with your business? What are your hopes and ambitions for the future? Are you looking to grow? How are you looking to grow? Have you thought about, taking a partnership to another level where maybe that could be a merger and acquisition? So I would definitely, it's got to be about the chemistry, chemistry first, and then everything else will follow.
Such good advice. And I like that tip there of starting with some sort of collaboration, some sort of work or project or campaign or some sort of partnership that you can embark on to see, if you're talking about a merger or acquisition, you could get some false positives on the values alignment and the relationship. And as you pointed out, the chemistry. But if you're doing some work together, it's where you really find out, right? That's where the rubber can meet the road, as they say. Well,
Yeah,
Carl, as before we get into our final two segments, as we always do here on Agency Life, what have we not touched on here? What are maybe some of the things that agency owners who are pursuing an acquisition or some sort of exit, they're looking at your advice and they could still maybe miss the mark in that being some sort of successful exit? What are some, maybe one or two of the pitfalls to look out for, even if they're following all the advice that we shared today? What do you want to kind of shine a light on the road ahead for them?
Okay, yeah, things to think about, which we haven't mentioned. Obviously, people is a key one. So that involves not only having the right staff in the right positions with the right skills, but that also kind of gets into, culture. Is there a positive culture in the business? But also, more importantly, is there a succession plan? Has anyone actually kind of thought, okay, if buyers leave, who could run the business? And I think you need to be mindful that you as an agency owner looking to sell, the buyer will think, rightly or wrongly, that as soon as you get your first check, that you might, as the seller, just leave. You might be, and that is the danger. If the initial check is big enough, then there is a danger, a threat that the agency owner might just say, "Thank you, I'm off now. You have it, it's yours." Now, of course, in most agencies are relationship businesses, they're people businesses. It's incredibly dangerous to let the buyer walk, or sorry, the seller walk as quickly, which is why there are typically 3 or 4 year earnouts, which is that period after the sale that more money gets paid to the seller over time. So it's really important to get that succession plan in place. Make sure that the key people have a number two. If it's a creative director that's a shareholder, has he got a really good deputy creative? If it's a techie person, do they have a great backup? Does the MD have a deputy? And work on that succession plan. Make sure that there's a team below the owners that could, worst case scenario, could run the business. If you want a quicker exit, then you really need to put yourself out of the job as quickly as possible. and demonstrate to the buyers that you're not needed. It all comes down to what you're hoping for. A lot of agency owners actually want to continue to work within a bigger organization and see that as a career development opportunity for them. But others don't want to work for anyone else, and that's why they start their own agency and can't think of anything worse than having a boss. So if you're the sort of agency that doesn't want a boss, then you need to minimize your burnout, which means in terms of time, and you need to then place a succession plan so that you can demonstrate to the buyers that you're not really that necessary to the future of the business. Therefore, please let me go as soon as possible.
It echoes something that you said earlier, beginning with the end in mind. And what are you really looking for? And that can look differently, but make sure you don't get yourself into a situation where you're like, this isn't exactly what I was wanting, or that I got what I didn't realize I didn't want, that sort of thing, right? One more question on this, Karl, because I love that you pointed out the importance of the people. It goes back to the relationship with your partner that we mentioned earlier. You could find the right buyer, the things could be right, you could have all the KPIs in place, but there are the people dynamics, the cultural dynamics that could be a blocker to either having that successful exit or having that exit go well. And so how do you recommend to agency owners going down this path have this conversation with the rest of their team as you're making those plans? What is kind of that balance of sharing enough and where they're going and being candid without oversharing? I'm sure you've seen it handled a number of different ways, some well, some not. It's always nuanced, but what do you advise people on there, Karl?
Yeah, you're right. It is a delicate conversation to have, and some people are very good at it, and some people are really not very good at it at all. I think the key thing is to make sure that you don't have gossip and whispering in the agency that just gets out of control because they've heard a rumor, or they're concerned, they're worried that they've seen some strange people come in the office and don't know why, and all those sort of things. It's obviously a lot easier if you no longer got an office, because you can have those. It can be more discreet. But in an agency where you still got people going to the office, then at some point the buyer will want to come and look at the agency and sort of kick the tires and go, okay, well, what's going on here? So I think you do need to prepare for the gossip to start. So I think bring people in advance to say we're looking for, and I like the term growth partner rather than you're looking to sell, because I think if you say looking to sell, the staff can get obviously cold feet or get worried that, oh, what does that mean? I don't like change. Am I going to be out of a job? All those kind of rumors can start. So by being in control of the conversation, I think is important, and having a conversation about looking for a growth partner, which we can to help us grow. If we and then you can start selling the benefits of growth. You can start saying that bigger, there's more opportunities for promotion. There's more opportunities for travel, there more opportunities for bigger and better clients. And you sell the benefit of having a bigger operation without saying we are looking to sell. We are looking to basically partner with another company, whether that's a competitor or a complementary agency. And I think that way you can control the narrative. As soon as you lose control of that, and then sometimes your best people will leave because I think they're worried that something's happening that's that they're not being told about. So I think that's really important to just keep that conversation going. Maybe not too soon, because if it's just it's just something that's just a seed of an idea, then you don't want necessarily want people to start worrying. But once you start going down the path of, okay, we're going to do something now, and they'll start noticing things. So you'll be looking at the bottom line, looking to increase your net profit figures. They'll want to know why are we looking? Why are we being more detailed? Why are we starting to sort of look at our values? Why are we looking at our processes? Why are we revising our contracts of employment, and all these things that you'd have to do to get your due diligence process done more quickly. You don't want to just suddenly do that and without any warning to the staff that we're looking for something. There's a potential something in the future that we're looking to do, which should be a partner of some sort.
Right. I like the way that you put it, a growth partner, selling the benefits of those growth and sharing it not too soon, but once you know that something you are at least trying to head towards, because last thing you want is, something I'm picturing like Office Space when they're heading around everybody and saying, "What exactly do you do here?" That is not the sort of scenario you want in your agency at any point, whether you're
Yeah.
heading down this acquisition path or not. Well, Carl,
Yeah.
you've given some great tips today, and we want to round it out as we always do with our final two segments here on Agency Life. So we're going to hit you with our Fast Five. And then one of my favorite parts, we're going to give you an opportunity to give someone a shout out who has impacted your career as an agency owner yourself and beyond. So let's start with the Fast Five. Carl, if someone gave you $10,000 a month right now to better run your consultancy, where do you think you would use that extra infusion of capital, maybe from a growth partner, as we were talking about today?
Yeah. But I think um, based on my current services, I'm almost entirely dedicated doing what to do one-to-one mentoring with agency founders or the boards of agencies. And I think to extend that, I'd like to consider spending a budget like that on maybe an e-learning platform. I could actually start to share some of that knowledge with a much wider audience.
I love that. There's so much power in, I think, even between the one-to-one coaching and the digital products, digital learning, kind of blending those two with some sort of group or cohort-based process. We've talked about that in the past with Bob Ruffalo from Impact in a previous episode, and how they as an agency are taking that model to their clients. But I digress. All right, this is the Fast Five, and I need to hold myself accountable to being actually fast with them. So number two, Carl, what are some of your all-time favorite business books?
I think the one that I find most practical, and I've actually I have to admit, I've taken some of those tools myself in my work, is Traction by Gino. I think that's a really practical for helping any business go through growth.
I love it. We shared some EOS tools just last week on the show. We'll link to that book in the show notes because I don't think we've linked to that before. And if you've heard us talk about EOS multiple times on the show and you're just like, I don't know, and you're more of a reader to get in, start with Traction. Great advice there, Carl. All right. Number three, Carl, what's one mistake you've made in running an agency that you'll never forget?
I think the one mistake that I won't forget is not having a conversation with my partner early enough, but in terms of what my intentions were, future of the business. I think that obviously proved to be and it resulted in a rather sticky end to my relationship with my partner, having to sort of force a sale rather than having to go in collaboration.
Yeah, it goes back to, I think, part of what you illustrated in that opening story, which I appreciate you sharing, Carl. All right, number four, what do you think is the hardest part about agency life, Carl?
The hardest part of agency life is not switching off, I think. Maybe that's true for businesses generally, business owners, but I think the hardest part is actually switching off and having some time out to just relax and unwind and rest because it's often a full on business that's with no days off. So I think that's
Mhm.
the most important thing is to try and find time that you can actually dedicate time to yourself to take some time out.
Yeah, it definitely feels that way. And I think that's why it's the hashtag and why we named it this show Agency Life, because it can feel like the business and the work is all consuming. So we like to end on a positive note. Number five of our Fast Five, Carl, what do you think is the best part about agency life? The other side of that coin.
All right. I think that's part of agency life is as an agency owner, it's you're in control of your own destiny. You can work with clients who you want to work with. You can change. You make a real positive impact to clients and hopefully the wider world. But for me, I think it's the variety. It's the variety that comes with it, and clients unfortunately often end up in working in one stream, one sector, whereas agencies can play with, multiple sectors, multiple clients, and really the variety. I think for me, variety is the spice of life. And that's really what got me into agency rather than client side.
Yeah, I love that. All right, Carl, as we do on every episode, we want to make sure we give you the opportunity to give someone a shout out who's impacted your own career journey. So, who do you want to thank or mention? Oh, excuse me. So, who do you want to thank or mention as we round out the conversation today?
Well, I think back in my long career, I'd like to shout out the person that gave me my first job in agency life, and that was a guy called Roger Peterson, who was based in who ran an agency in Boston called Boston Peterson, and he gave me my first job as a graduate trainee when I was 21. And from that moment on, I knew I wanted to work in agencies. So, and he's still running an agency, even though he's probably well into his 70s by now. But yeah, it gave me a really great insight into life, and yeah, I had a fantastic year, working and living in the States for him. So it was brilliant.
That's fantastic. All right, Carl. So, for anyone who has gotten a ton of value from our conversation today, which I think is a lot of the audience today, because we talked about some very tangible steps if you are going to head down this path, either in the short term or maybe in the long term, towards an acquisition, a merger, partnering with a growth partner, how to find those folks, how to approach them, and how to get yourself ready, both with some of the financial numbers, the KPIs, with that list, as well as the list of things you should be thinking about and tackling on the people side. Great conversation today. So if people have gotten value from all of this, what's the best way for them to reach out and maybe stay connected with you?
Well, I hope there has been some value there for some of your listeners. I think the best way to keep in touch with me would be find me on LinkedIn. Karl Heasman. I think there's only two of us in the world, so hopefully you'll see which one's me. Or you could look at my website, greycottconsultancy.com. But yeah, I think LinkedIn is probably the best way to get hold of me.
I love it. Well, Carl, thank you for a fantastic conversation. Enjoyed the story that you told at the beginning, and again, the great advice you shared with agencies today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.